the album concept hour. The album concept hour. It's the album concept hour.
Welcome, everybody, to the Album Concept Hour. We are here for another week for another fantastic album. And this one is a gigantic, very interesting, multi-layered album that we're going to get into today. It's the Olivia, Tremor Controls, music from the Unrealized film script, Dusk at Cubist Castle. It's pretty much everything we look for in a concept hour here. I'm your host, Brad the Baron. We have our co-host, John, over here. How's it going, John? And then we have a great friend filling in for Dave tonight as another co-host on the other coast.
Great
we have
friend
Jim.
To the podcast.
Host to coast.
Host to coast.
How about that?
I was trying to figure that out, but yeah, we have
Guest
Jim
host
from
coast to coast.
Inspector 34, our resident Beach Boys expert, and he's also a huge fan of the Elephant Six record label, which is why we have him here.
It's
we
true.
We have a very, very important guest here. You may have heard rumbles of this documentary, Elephant Six record company documentary floating around, and it's finally coming to theaters. In fact, by the time you hear this, it might actually be in theaters. But we have the director and one of the executive producers of that film. This is Chad, aka CB Stockfleth. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Dude, I'm really, really stoked to have you here. I reached out to you when I first became aware of the documentary's existence, and you were like, "Well, I'm not quite doing the festival circuits yet. Reach out to me later." And I'm like, "All right." Put that in the back of my head, and then I finally saw you putting posts about it. I'm like, oh crap, am I too late for this? And I messaged you, and you responded right back, and got the ball rolling to come on the podcast. So I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, when did you first hear about it? Was it in the VHS rental tape days, or?
I think it was maybe I hadn't heard about that actually. I think it was maybe when you had just started to put forth the effort to put it on a wider release.
Yeah, sure.
Because I only found out about the VHS thing when I did a little bit of research on this.
I heard about the VHS thing and was just so excited, and I'm so happy that it's getting a wide release now, because I was starting to worry that it was never going to happen.
Yeah, that was always the plan. I mean,
for it never to happen, or for it to get a wide release?
Free VHS rental.
Okay.
The pandemic had us, press pause on the whole process for a couple of years. It made it difficult.
Of us press pause on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Press pause on the world.
Yeah, the whole world. But yeah, tell me about that original experience doing the VHS that needs to be like special ordered or something. Was that just kind of to give kind of credence to how the Elephant Six recording company worked with a lo-fi kind of approach?
Absolutely. It was, I'd spent, at this point, the process of making this film has been over 10 years. I think we're closing in on almost 13 years, which is so crazy to think that much time has gone by.
Yeah.
But in, maybe 2018, 2019, we were getting pretty close to having the movie completely filmed. In our mind. That's what we thought, and a strong edit of it. Yeah. And I was actually doing interviews in Athens and with Robert Schneider, who was living there at the time, and we were sort of lamenting the fact that there's no good
the music Robert Schneider for the listeners.
That's right. And the Elephant Six
the film guy
producer,
just goes by Rob.
Don't mix them up. Yeah.
No, people do. People they're very disappointed when Rob Schneider shows up. Yeah. But we were lamenting the fact that there's no good media for films these days. Like VHS tapes are obviously out of fashion. DVDs, not even a lot of people are buying and using. So it's sort of all streaming services, which robs you of the experience of having this, this artifact. And so much of Elephant Six was, especially early on, based on these really interesting artifacts of cassette tapes and 7 inches and things like that. So, and they got their start with a mail order catalog. And so we were just sort of riffing, like, wouldn't it be funny if we made a VHS tape? And then it just sort of like spiraled on that thought for a little while and was like, maybe there's a way we could do this. So
and it really worked, right?
It did work. Much to my surprise, it was set up as an experiment, completely analog, right? So I made a flyer, like an old pull tab flyer, and I put it up in some coffee shops and record stores. Yeah. And then I found a tape cassette answering machine at a thrift store, and I bought that, and I created a message on it. So if you called in to that, it would tell you then a P.O. box that you could write into. And if you wrote a letter and promised to watch and return the movie, and that was all it required, was a promise, then I would send a tape. And each tape was like decorated differently, had different covers, and they had the movie on them plus different things like extra live footage or music videos, that sort of thing. So each tape was unique and numbered, and they had a little library card in them that you could sign and then send back. And much to my surprise, I just put the flyer out and was like, let's see if this works. And slowly but surely, a couple letters started trickling in. And then one day I went to the P.O. box and there was like 90 letters. And they were just like, wow, this is really happening. Okay. Yeah. And it was more than I could keep up with.
It hit like a Reddit post or something.
Somebody like then posted about it online. Right. And then Pitchfork picked it up and Spin and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And, started getting a lot, but it was really cool because we got all these creative letters. People spent a lot of time making homemade, construction paper really cutouts of airplane or Tibetan prayer flags with poetry written on them and all this. I have this like box of cool letters that people sent in.
Wow.
It sort of seems like it sort of brought everyone into the spirit of the thing.
I thought it was really great, but then I read a Reddit thread and people were just like appalled that I had the gall to put this movie out in this way, and they thought it was so stupid and silly. And I was like, they don't all get it. But some people, I think a lot of people really appreciated the spirit of it. And our hope at the time was like we would just piggyback the actual release of the movie on the back of that, right?
Were they mad at the very idea of the VHS release, or were they just thinking that was the only way that it was ever going to be?
Maybe. I mean, it was never advertised as this will be the only way. But also, I think, and this was interesting, and, I thought of this as sort of its own unique art project that the film was a part of, was, people have an expectation that everything is available at all times. And when we were young, or when I was young in the 90s, you really cherished
when we were young.
When we were young. Growing up, like I lived in a small town in central Kentucky. And so finding interesting things took work. And when you had a thing that you loved, you spent a lot of time with it and you thumbed through it and, listened to it over and over again. And now things feel so much more disposable, right? They're readily available, but then you watch it or listen to it and then you move on immediately. This was a way to sort of like confront that, because you have to go dig your VCR out of a closet and hook it up. And then, and you get this thing in the mail
if you don't have one.
Right. Or go find one, which are rare. And then, if you go to all that trouble, maybe you'll invite your friend over and I got this tape, let's watch it together. So
have a VCR
that was the
night,
hope was like, make it an event more than just like clicking on Netflix and scrolling through and finding something. Like, let's make something that's a little bit of a personal event for you and your friends if you can get this. So that was the idea about it. And some people really loved it and some people did not love it so much.
Well, at least it resonated with enough people that you couldn't even keep up at one point, right?
It resonated with me, and that was all that I really cared about. It tickled me so much. I thought it was wonderful.
Well, I was going to ask, coming to a project like this, what makes you decide to make it into like a full-on, documentary to be distributed in the way that you already talked about, as well as like, now it's getting further distribution rather than like, putting that energy into a YouTube video or like a streaming thing? Like, what to you is like the difference between those two types of projects and how you would approach those to like maybe content creators out there?
Yeah. I mean, I love, I went to film school and I love film and cinema. And so the idea from the start was always to make, a film, not necessarily a YouTube video, although, and maybe those weren't as prevalent at the time too. People weren't doing like high production value sort of deep dives on
when
things.
You started, what was it, 13 years ago? Definitely.
Yeah, it was 2010. It was 2010.
Not as prevalent as that is.
Yeah. And now, I love those kind of videos. I watch on YouTube quite regularly, and it's like, wow, these are great. But the thing I wanted to do was to have it in theaters and be like a real movie, and we're really pleased to have that be happening currently.
Yeah, I'm excited to finally be able to like, because I'm not from LA. I wasn't near one of the releases, so like I'm really excited for the chance to actually be able to see this thing, because I've heard so much about it at this point, and all the hype from the different like music pages online that I follow. So,
I'll say having gotten to see it in theaters is a fantastic experience. I would recommend seeing it in theaters over seeing it screened. Anything on the stream it if you can't see it in the theater, but I think it was such a satisfying experience, especially because the people who are there watching the film are people who are fans of the thing, and so being in a room full of people that are there to love and appreciate this thing made the experience a lot more meaningful for me personally. At the screening I got to go to.
Jim, that's right. It's a film about community, and so to watch it in a communal experience feels right. And I think we're entering a time, at the time of this taping, like we're knee deep in the Barbenheimer phenomenon, and I think people are returning to theaters in mass in a really interesting way that they haven't since the pandemic. And so I've been really pleased. We've done a few screenings in cities already, and the turnout has been great. And we're going to be opening in I think 40 cities next week.
Well, because I think that's
then
something.
It'll be on demand on September 1st.
Pleasantly surprised and shocked to see you guys are screening in my hometown, Lowell, Massachusetts, of all places.
That's right.
If you think it might not be coming to you and you're listening, check, because you never know where it'll show up.
Or we've really people have reached out to their local independent theater, and that's how some of these screenings have been arranged. And we're in a really privileged position with this film that the bands have such a fan base. And people are so excited about it that they're literally calling their theater and will you please show this movie? But for those people that can't see it that way, again, it'll be on Apple and Prime and all that sort of stuff on September 1st.
And having seen it in the theater, I'd love to watch it again. So once it is available to stream, I will. But it's got rewatch potential.
Yeah, I think it's pretty dense.
You got Lance Bangs involved with the project. What was that like? Because he's he's done so many music videos throughout the years. He's a really important director or filmographer. I'm losing my words.
Sure.
But he's a legend in the field. How did he get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Lance before I ever knew he had anything to do with Elephant Six.
He's an Athens native, right? He
had lived in Athens in college, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I believe he's from New Jersey originally, but he had moved down to Athens to go to college. Out of film school, early 2000s, I was watching a lot of different videos and things like that, and I kept seeing this name pop up, Lance Bangs, on David Cross comedy specials, or Michelle Gondry or Spike Jones,
I think that's
music
right.
videos.
I think that David Cross is where I saw his name. Yeah.
Yeah, and all these cool things. And I'm like, who is this Lance Bangs guy? I don't know what his deal is, but I like it. I like all this work that he's putting out. And then when I started working on the Elephant Six documentary, people were like, oh, you know who you should talk to that has great archival footage is Lance Bangs. And I was like, oh, of course he would be involved in this scene. He's a part of all of these things that I love. So, so found out that he had been living in Athens in the 90s and had the good sense to identify the talent of this group. And, before video cameras were as prevalent as they are now in everybody's pocket, he was going to these shows and bringing the equipment and taping them. So he had this awesome wealth of Neutral Milk Hotel and Elf Power and Olivia Tremor Control footage that just, that not much else existed beyond what he had, right? There's a few things that I've been able to find, but he really had the best stuff. So we were really excited to get him on board and have his participation.
One of the greatest things that I enjoyed from the film was getting to see all this footage. It was from having been a fan for so long, and what you get is there's the handful of clips on YouTube of the 90s performances, and that's about what you get. So it's
Yeah.
just like a dream to get to see all this archival footage as a fan. I imagine for you as a fan and documentarian, you got unfettered access to all this stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
Wow,
And there's so much, like this is a 93-minute movie, and there's just hours and hours of footage from Lance and from other sources too that it's I wish we could make a series because we could make a whole nother movie almost with the amount of stuff that's there. But
is there any thought to maybe doing like a DVD or Blu-ray or something released with like bonus footage and anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know how much bonus stuff will be released at this point. There's talk about a DVD, but I haven't heard any concrete information about what, if anything, we'll be able to include on that additionally.
Sure.
There are licenses and things like that.
Yes.
With it too. So.
How much say did the artists have in like what got in and what didn't into the final cut?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
They were really
very hands-on.
They're really passionate and clever to in general maintain ownership of their masters and things like that. It was having control of their work was really important to them from the very beginning. And so mostly they were able to avoid the thing you see where people lose their masters and don't have control over their own art at a certain point, which has to feel so terrible. So mostly they were able to give their blessing to us to use stuff if they wanted it to be used. And that took time too. Like in the making of the film, it took a long time to make because I didn't come from the scene, and so I had to meet people along the way, right? And it's a very big scene. There's I don't know how you classify who is in Elephant Six and who's not. I'm sure some people will, but you could say there's 100 members of Elephant
Nebulous,
Six.
maybe.
Yeah, and so it was this process of like meeting one, doing an interview, him going like, okay, that went pretty good, and then it's like, well, I'll call Scott Spillane and I'll tell him you're going to come over and like, you're going to bring a camera, but you're cool. It's fine. And so, but I'll tell him that. So it's just like this like vouching, this like domino effect of cool. Like, yeah, he's cool. He's all right. He's all right. I mean, he's kind of cool. He's at least not cool.
So how did you get
best you can hope for?
Right. That's all I've ever.
How did you get involved in doing the documentary from the start? Since you weren't necessarily involved with the scene.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Kentucky, and I had lived in Lexington, Kentucky for a while, and then went to film school and moved back to Louisville. But we had sort of like a creative scene of musicians and artists in Lexington. It included some cool bands, a band called Big Fresh, Robert Beatty, who's gone on to do a lot of like amazing album artwork, and Matt Duncan and some other people that were sort of just like in our scene there, right? And Robert Schneider moved to Lexington to go to school. He, was already starting to pursue mathematics a little bit. Okay. And he decided to attend the University of Kentucky. I think Hillary, who was the drummer for the Apples in Stereo, and also his wife, and they share a child together, she had family that lived in Lexington. So that's why they had considered it there.
Yeah.
But then he met sort of like my friend group there, this band Big Fresh, John Ferguson, and was like, oh, there's like cool, interesting, independent pop music and art happening here. And so I had been taping and, videoing a lot of these concerts and making music videos and that sort of stuff, doing album covers. And I did a live taping of an Apples in Stereo concert in 2007. And it was the first show of the New Magnetic Wonder album tour.
Very cool.
Okay.
And Bill Doss had just joined the band for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't really understand the significance of that at the time. But for me, I got 6 cameras. I got all my friends, and I got HD cameras, which in that time period was like,
that's
cool.
A lot,
it was right at that transition between SD and HD. And so made this like 6 camera live concert, and it turned out pretty good. And Robert, I think, was impressed by it. And he sort of, if you haven't seen the movie, Robert Schneider is this like very effusively excited person who he makes you feel like you can just do anything,
like an excited 12-year-old, I think is how David Cross describes
that's how David Cross describes him. He's super smart. He loves to do you see why he was able to create this community, because he really just like finds the people around him. It's not like he was like, let's go to LA and find the best documentarian. It's just like, here's this kid. But I know socially a little bit. He did a cool thing. And he was
Yeah.
like, maybe you can do a documentary about me and my friends. And I was like, I don't know that much about it, but that sounds amazing. I love doing film and video work around music. And he was like, I don't know. I have a feeling that you're the guy that can do it. You can do it. You know, I think you can do it. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. I can do it. I believe you, Robert. I'll do it.
And his instincts were good.
I mean, yeah, we got all the way here. We did it.
I mean, that's the perfect role of a producer, right? Like that is like everything that they are supposed to do is like encourage anyone creatively around them. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his instincts are great.
place.
You know, he's able to find talented people wherever he goes, you know.
Yeah.
As he moves around the country, he just sort of like attracts and collects talented people to him. And so, yeah, with a lot of persistence, you know, from there, he called Bill Doss and Will Hart from Olivia Tremor Control in Athens. They were the first people that he was like, look, this guy's going to come down and you should let him interview you. And that's how it started from there. And then, you know, that was all independently funded at the time too. So I would sort of like save up $200 or $300 so I could drive down to Athens and crash on somebody's couch, you know, sleep in their guest room with like all the cats and that kind of thing.
Just so you can make it happen.
From there, and so, you know, then maybe it would take me a month or two before I had the money to go somewhere else. And a lot of these people are spread out. So, you know, that's why this project took so long, honestly, is that,
I mean, it's a lot of pieces to put together, especially,
just very organically put together as well.
And I mean, I don't know if like reclusive would be the right term to explain bands from Elephant Six, but it's like, they're just
private.
not talked about very much. Private is, like, I mean, I know if you look up a lot, you know, I come from like Neutral Milk Hotel, my first experience into that. And so I was obsessed with Jeff Mangum and any information available about him. And there
so
was not
when
much.
I first started learning about it,
didn't seem...
this was right in the height of that time period when, you know, Jeff and his, as they put it, J.D. Salinger-esque, you know, reclusivity, stepping away from performing. Anytime he went out, you know, Pitchfork would have a front page story about it, and people were really desiring.
I think that's about the time I discovered them as well, and that mystique was so built up around them. I think I was in high school at the time, and it just like grabbed me.
Yeah, it was really thick at that time too when I started, and I actually was I intentionally tried to avoid seeking out Jeff for a while. I think I was intimidated for one, and for two.
I
think that's respectful. Also,
that was part of it. And
is not.
Also, I think, you know, a lot of people just sort of expected it to be the Jeff Mangum movie, and while he's certainly a part of it and a great part of it, to me, the spirit of it was so much more. He's one piece of this greater puzzle, where the parts. Altogether, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts or something, right?
Well, so Jim introduced me to kind of the rest of Elephant Six.
I was going to say, Brad, the comment that you made to me earlier today is perfect. Perfectly segues from this conversation into the album conversation. Yeah. Which is, you said, like, this album is so amazing. Why isn't Olivia Tremor Control as widely revered as Neutral Milk Hotel?
Yeah, I could like after hearing the full album, I was like, this is a, you know, a masterpiece, especially for a debut album. And like, how is it not on the same level and on people's lists as like In an Airplane Over the Sea? I mean, I know In an Airplane Over the Sea really tugs at your heartstrings, I guess, but like, it's just so good.
It's easy to forget too that it is a debut album because it's so fully realized and so fleshed out.
Yeah, it's that's always makes me impressed to see that. And they deliver. And you also introduced us to Major Organ and the Adding Machine. You remember that?
That's right. Was that my
first?
Boy,
we did both of those albums, haven't we?
We've done both of those.
Oh my God! Yeah, I remember that one.
That one was an interesting. Well, that's what another thing that, you know, I didn't know much about the Elephant Six Company, and then I heard that, and I'm like, okay, what is this Elephant Six Company exactly? after hearing that, and hearing this again, I have even more questions. So I'm glad that there is a documentary that has been made to answer these questions. You know,
yeah. For my musical taste, Olivia was the first band that I really actually like jived with. You know, I was in the 90s and early 2000s into like much different music than I guess sort of indie rock or something at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of became aware of Neutral Milk Hotel, and then when I met Robert, I sort of knew what the Apples were about. But when I heard Dusk at Cubist Castle, that was the first record. Was like, oh, this is a lot of things that I like all in one place.
Yeah.
This is
I had a
home
similar
recording blown out to 11 or whatever.
Yeah,
I had a similar kind of thing where Neutral Milk Hotel was like my gateway into the whole thing, but like having never heard anything like that, it's like, this is great and I love this. But then after they're discovering the other bands, the other Elephant Six bands like Olivia, was like, oh, this was what I was looking like. The aspects of what I liked about this one thing are way more prevalent here. Yeah, and I think the Elephant Six is so great with that because there's so much cross-pollination between bands, where they like this one thing that I love about this band. Oh, this band is like mostly that. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's a really, really cool, I mean, especially hearing this and then hearing at the end of, I mean, we'll get there, but the very end, there's like some weird, spooky kind of, sounding theremin, is it? I never remember what instrument that is.
That's
Julia.
Saw? Yeah. He's blowing a saw.
But like, it evokes like the thoughts of like, in an airplane over the sea, because that uses that a lot. So like it's the ending, and I'm like, oh, I now I just want to throw on In an Airplane Over the Sea, because there's that just loose connection, just because they're a collective.
For those that don't know or haven't seen the movie, that a lot of these guys are in the bands. I mean, the Olivia Tremor Control was a band started by Jeff Mangum, Bill Dawson, Will Hart, and then on this record, Dusk, Jeff Mangum and Julian Coster, who plays the saw and banjo and Neutral Milk. They're both on this record too. And then he's also like the drummer in the Gerbils sometimes, where Scott Spillane's the main songwriter. It's whoever's the main songwriter has their own band, and everybody like plays backup in that band. It's
whoever's
really
around that night,
totally,
for
that
the,
too, right?
party. Like,
it's social as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that even in just the trailer of the documentary. Like you see a little bit of what we're talking about here. But let's get into the first track, though. We have a lot of tracks to get to tonight. I am excited to get into this one, though. This is a real trip, this album. It's got a lot of stuff going on. We have like almost a full album, and then we have like 10 tracks of the Green Typewriter. And then we have like another like cushion at the end of it. So we got
this is a double LP. So
double LP, definitely. Yeah. And we used to try to do these in 2-parters, but now we just try to barrel through them. So we're gonna try to get through the clips fairly fast for you guys, and discuss a little bit of the concepts.
You said that this was a movie that never got made. What is the movie?
Oh,
Can
that's
fill
kind
me
of
in on that before we roll into this.
That's a very good question, John. Thank you. Actually,
I listened to this whole thing at work, and I was just very like, I would love a mini explanation, as the real newbie, the real noob here of this little grouping for this whole thing.
Yeah. So I don't have a great explanation besides it being somewhat of a acid trip of sorts.
As far
Best
as
explanation I can figure out.
It's just more like a framing device for the album. There's no actual film or script to my knowledge. But I don't know if you unearthed anything in the documentary.
Well, I think so. What we're talking about is the actual formal name of this record is music from the unrealized film script, Dusk at Cubist Castle. So this film script was unrealized, I suppose.
It does say an unrealized film script. You're right. It does say it's a film script, but it's a film script that it was not created.
It was never created. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that I remember reading that the Olivia Tremor Control was mostly chosen because it sounded cool. Which is, I guess, why most band names are chosen.
They use a lot of. They were fans of the William Burroughs cut-up technique, where they would just type out or write out random words and then cut them up into a little salad, and then pull out random words and put them together. So that might be where the name of the band came from.
Original band name generator.
They provide a lot of interesting questions in their music and in their artwork, and I find it best that not all of them are answered.
Well, I was about to say, yeah. This is definitely a J.J. Abrams approach with the mystery box and no answers. Although I will say, I think that weirdly the most coherent, well, not coherent, the most like together bits will probably be the green typewriter. That's probably conceptually the most connected. But for now though, we have the first 11 tracks of the album where we just get some great, Beach Boys, Beatles-esque music, lo-fi.
Sid Barrett, Pink Floyd.
Style. A little bit of early Floyd too. Yep, definitely. So this first track is called The Opera House. And let's hear a little bit of that. So yeah, already if you didn't know what year this was recorded, you might assume it was, perhaps decades earlier than it was.
1968 or so.
Yeah.
Sonically very kind of a unique record in my opinion. I think I would recommend listening to this record with headphones on, like a lot of Elephant Six records. They're very interested in the complete stereo field and immersing you in a little world. Yeah. And this record is, I think, quite psychedelic, and there's a lot happening. It's a very dense record. There's a lot of sounds coming at you from different places, things ping-ponging between your headphones. Yeah. And a lot of mixed fidelity as well. This is a combination of 4-track cassette recordings, then
multiple different 4-track cassette recordings,
multiple different ones mixed onto an 8-track with overdubs, which are then chopped up and put back together in other ways too. Yeah, so it's got a really unique sound to it.
They went forth the extra mile to do that.
Very fuzzy, very gritty. Fuzzy. A lot of like overblown preamps to get fuzz sounds and distortion. Not a lot of necessarily like overdrive pedals and things like that. They're just like slamming the gear.
Yeah. Well, that was part of what was kind of special about the Elephant Six recording company, right? Like they would just kind of find, kind of cheap, like whatever they could get their hands on stuff, and just use whatever they could use around them. And that is part of what informed their like kind of lo-fi approach to songwriting and everything.
Absolutely. I mean, they're just making do with what they have. Sometimes recording things just on boom boxes, not even 4 tracks, but like a boom box, and then facing it at another boom box that can then record onto that. And they would like go in the closet so it would be quiet and record one to the other back and forth like that. And that sort of like degraded fidelity was actually really attractive to them.
So I got this Casio from a Goodwill. You can still see the sticker on it. And it doesn't have power. Like you can't plug it in. You got to get a bunch of like D batteries. But I use this to record, like create like music for my YouTube series. Cause like I want to do this on the shittiest thing I can find, cause I really appreciate that. Some of the, better artists such as Jim that can do that really well. It's Spectre 34, by the way, if you haven't heard them.
Plug the better artists are. Better artists are the subject of the show.
I was really struck today listening to this record that a lot of the sounds, because I grew up 4-tracking as well and was very dissatisfied with the sound. The sound of an acoustic guitar through a Tascam 4-track has this like really brittle plastic quality to it that I just like couldn't wait to do better than, and they just embraced it and incorporated it. And so there's a lot of these kind of garbage sounds that, to my ear in that time period that they were like, great, this is awesome. This is what we're going to do. It's so different than my approach. I couldn't wait to get better gear. And they're like, no, this is the best gear.
No. This is it. This is the peak of the mountain right here. So it starts off like really establishing their sound. There's pretty simple, lyrically there's a lot of like, it says it's a kind of a throwback to that psychedelic time. There's some stuff that's like a little whimsical, and you're going to hear it. If you hear it a few times, you kind of get different meanings from it, maybe,
This is one of the more Olivia Tremor Control in general, I feel like sort of oscillates between poppy and wildly experimental. And I'd say this song's on the poppier side, but even in their poppier songs, there's always just this like constant barrage of noise and sounds and everything. That's one of the things I love so much about
apparently
this album and this band.
Bill Doff referred to that as their goal to be mysterious and happy, I guess, for this record. I think that if that's what they were going for, like they, both fronts they landed it, I think.
I think in the there was a Will Hart quote from the documentary that really spoke to me. It was like, for every moment of harmony, there should be a moment of disharmony.
Right.
That is, I like that line. That is good. I'm glad that made the cut.
And I think so much of the aesthetic of this album is created by the interplay between Bill Doss and Will Hart, who come from it with a different approach. Bill Doss is like a songwriter and very structured and trying to find specific sounds and write hooks and choruses and that sort of thing, whereas Will Hart is coming from it from this like very like collage-esque random sound interference and distortion and ephemera, and I think those things together, they mix really well on these Olivia records, and they both have solo records too, so you can sort of hear them like removed from the context of one another.
Okay.
But
together with Olivia's, it's really special.
Olivia I think I love both of their solo stuff a lot, but I feel like this is one of those things that's greater than the sum of its parts in that way, where they just complement each other really, really well.
Yeah. And then we get on to the second track, which is I'm assuming a theme to a character that was unrealized. This is the Frosted Ambassador. So we're gonna have a lot of instrumentals in this one. So
picked a very Peanutsy sounding.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking Vince Guaraldi or whatever. Yeah.
You would have been proud of that. Of that clip.
Yeah. Maybe that's why it's frosted. It's a Peanuts Christmas special kind of song.
That's where you start to hear, I think of them as sort of like a kitchen sink band. They're just like throwing everything at these tracks, and then while there's piano and little like toy xylophone or something are the predominant parts, you hear them like banging on pots and pans in the background and like all this weird percussive stuff happening.
It does sound like you are like in the middle of like a house party.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and everyone's just jamming.
Everyone's just having
which
a cocktail,
might be exactly what this was.
Smoking a cigarette, hanging around. Some of this stuff just really is like organized chaos in the best way.
It's
like Neutral Milk Neutral Milk Hotel or what was the other one we were talking about?
The Major Organ.
Major Organ and
They generally like. I think that's why these people gelled. Probably is they seem to share that love of discordant and beauty in the music.
They sort of like try to fill it up with everything, right? It's like they said, it's harmony and disharmony. It's pop music and experimental music. It's music concrete, and all of these influences mixed together.
We were really getting to a point where like we were, I don't know, everyone had a genre and you were in that genre and you were marketed as that genre, which, obviously the music industry is always trying to do in some ways, but like this is something that can't be genred so easily. It can't be just thrown under one and done. You know what I mean? I
think Elephant Six might be its own genre.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's like a collective that the sum is better than the whole of its parts. I'm saying that wrong, but that phrase. But yeah, it's a collective of people that really want to support each other in whatever weird, chaotic idea they might have, it seems.
Yeah, and they might all be rooted in the same, like if it's a metaphor as a tree or something, like in the trunk of the tree, they're all sort of coming from a similar aesthetic place, but each branch of the tree, depending on who's sort of the leading creative force on it, will follow a different, whimsy, farther. But their friends all kind of come along with them on it, right? So like, this person wants to go, real far this way. When they're like, cool, we'll go this way with you. But then they're like, but I want to go this way. And everybody's like, well, we'll go this way with you,
That's the most amazing thing about, I think, the whole Elephant Six phenomenon is that for so many people to be involved with it, but always to be willing, like no matter how far out the sound is. So yeah, okay, sure, we'll do that.
Yeah. And I mean, taking it to its end result is like, something that, a lot of people don't even take that stage or take that step, and actually finish the song and, keep it going. You need to have a group to support that sort of habit,
Yeah, I think it requires a kind of maybe bravery, because they're making weird choices sometimes.
Yeah,
that's true. That's
objectively
true. There's definitely some bravery
musical
involved.
Choices, and so to be
definitely takes a sort of callousness to just, and not a bad callousness. I mean, like a good kind of callousness to just be
thick
like
skin.
Yeah, we don't care. We know what we're doing. We like,
and they seem to have had
what's
that
important
from a very young age. They seem to have a real self-confidence in their creative vision, kind of since like high school, getting to know them. I asked Will Hart once.
That's pretty cool.
Because like I have a little bit of maybe stage fright or something. I don't love being on stage and performing so much. And I asked Will, I was like, did it make you nervous to get up and perform? He was like, no, never. It's like I would just do it. Yeah, it is never a big deal. It's like, I don't care if they like it or not. And in fact, like some of their other air quote bands, there's a project called Clay Bears, which was just sort of like a noise freak out with saxophones and synthesizers and banging on drums. And, I think they would like clear out bars with that music, and reveled in that. And, every person that left brought them joy. But the people that stayed then became like huge fans.
That's true. Yeah. Sometimes.
And they looked out in that crowd and they said, "We love you."
They were playing to the one guy in the room that wasn't going to leave.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's how you build a very dedicated fan base.
Yes.
Or that guy joined the band.
Yeah, exactly. That guy is now part of the band. Yeah. Well, this next track is Jumping Fences, continuing on with this album. This is where some people online were saying that the trip starts, if you're following that concept of this album. Yeah, I wanted to get that transition in there.
Very beautiful, Beatlesy.
Yeah, right.
Transition.
That's
the Strawberry Fieldsy moment there. For sure.
And we're gonna break it up by tracks here, but that is one of the fun parts about this record is that it plays really well as a record. If you let it play, the songs bleed from one to the next a lot.
There's a lot of
really cool interstitial stuff.
Yeah.
Going through it this way is like a new experience for me because I realized listening to it before the show, I was like, I don't actually like know what any of the songs are called because I always just listen to it as a whole.
Yeah, this was a strange one to clip, and some of these tracks out of context are going to sound, I don't know what you're going to get out of them, honestly. So definitely like recommend listening to this all the way through. I know we don't always recommend that, but this one absolutely you want to listen all the way through to understand what the hell we're talking about. Because once we get to the Green Typewriters, we'll talk about it more. But
this gives me interested too because of people saying this is where the trip starts in the album.
So I thought that was an interesting take. Yeah.
In preparation for the show, I listened for the first time to this album with the bonus album at the same time for what people say you can do in a quadraphenic experience. But I did.
Wait, did you try that somehow?
Yeah, I did. I just played them both on YouTube at the same time. But the one is 5 minutes shorter than the other. So I started them both at the same time, but this is making me think maybe that's the point where you start them if that's where the trip starts.
Oh,
maybe there's instructions in the liner notes or something.
yeah.
Maybe.
It's like the third line.
They would never make it that easy. These people don't sound like they would ever make it that. You are supposed to figure that out yourself.
Yeah.
They know that. You're not supposed to know that until you know that.
Yeah, they want you jumping fences to try to figure
it
out.
This is a good section too, because you can see that jumping fences is obviously a Bill Doss song. Yeah. And then Define a Transparent Dream is obviously a Will song, even though they're both like maybe playing other instruments and adding to it, but you can sort of see the writing style of each one.
Yeah. That's why I like that transition a lot. Like it's just so like for me, the jumping fences sounded a little bit Ween-ish. I felt like Ween could probably do a good rendition of that. Yeah, the vocals lean a little pitchy here at times. There's a lot of things that are like not perfectly in tune on this album, which I really enjoy. Well, you know what? That's exactly, now that you bring that up, that's exactly what drew me to Neutral Milk, I think. I was always a big fan of, weirder vocalists that sound like they're straining maybe, or like sound like they're not supposed to be singing, but they're still hitting the notes.
Yeah, he really reaches out for them.
Well, yeah, and I've learned like almost the entire album of In an Airplane Over the Sea. I used to play it all the time just to, just by myself. I'd be playing this and singing as best I could, and like it is just so he's straining so hard to hit all of these big like emotional beats in that album, and I always loved that you could hear how hard he was trying in that album.
And if you've ever been in the room with him when he does it, Jeff, he has a huge voice. I mean, he really sings with his whole body and his diaphragm and his chest, and he really makes like a very big sound.
Get close to that, like you really have to like put it out, like to get those songs out there.
And he's a big guy too, I think I'm 6'2", and I think he's a little taller than me, so he's putting like his whole physique into building up these tunes too. I'm so sad I missed when they did a reunion tour thing. I think it was just Jeff Mangum. I don't know if it was the rest of the band, but he did a solo tour, and then they brought the whole band together.
I was very, very broke at the time, couldn't make it. Who was it that was playing the guitar and singing for that TikTok video or the short that's been going around? Do you know who was the one that was like leading that? In an Airplane Over the Sea, everyone was singing together.
Oh, outside of the movie screening?
Outside the movie screening,
That was Michael Cronin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He's a member. He has his own music. I think he's a member of Ty Segall's band as well.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of them, like Jeff Mangum's probably the only one I recognize visually. You know what I mean? He's the only one that's been on like, tops of like lists and like, things in the media.
Yeah, that was a tribute concert that we did after the screening. So that was sort of like a house band that we put together, and then we invited special guests to come up and cover songs from Elephant Six that they loved.
What did I see Robert Schneider on the stage in one of those pictures?
No, he wasn't there.
No.
Okay. Sorry, I saw someone that had similar hair, I think, to the picture that I saw of Robert Schneider.
I don't know.
Trying to make connections. So this next track we have for you guys, I'm going to keep it moving right along. Very John Lennon-y kind of track. If you're looking for a Beatles analog, as I always am. This is Define a Transparent Dream.
I am the Eggman. Woo! I am the Eggman.
Yeah. It's bringing it back.
I
was reading that part of the reason that maybe this music didn't I don't know, I guess take off as much is because we were at the tail end of like the grunge era of like popular music. Do you guys think that there's some truth to that as far as like, you know, sounds like this not getting as much attention or anything, or what do you either?
I'd say there certainly was what was cool in alternative music at that time was pretty much the grunge adjacent stuff, and this very much was not. It was very much not that.
There's nothing there for you if that's all you were looking for, you know.
Yeah, I think we were starting to get banned. You know, Radiohead was starting to transition from the Pablo Honey to more like their Benz, you know, OK Computer kind of style. So maybe the tide was changing, but I think we were still coming out of like definitely like the Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, I mean, all that stuff was still very prevalent on the radio if you were putting on like alternative radio at the time.
Definitely.
I think that another thing too was that a big part of the that like Gen X sort of indie alternative rock, even if it wasn't necessarily grunge, was like there was a level of like I don't care, like a level of not apathy but sort of indifference that Elephant Six is like very much the opposite of that.
That's
and
true.
It's very earnest and
culturally.
very passionate. Which is certainly a huge part of the appeal, but definitely. If what you're looking for is
at the time,
I'm too cool for this, then it's not necessarily going to hit you the same.
Yeah, and there was definitely like a real like anti-hippie like sentiment in like comedy. I remember too. So it was like, you know, if you're listening to this flowery, you know, happy stuff, like what are you doing or whatever.
It's so funny. It wasn't cool to be happy. We were
right?
We were anti-joy.
It was cool to be depressed.
We had the emo thing when I was growing up, you know, like it's just every now and again there's just a depressing movement that just goes across the country.
Yeah. Yeah, but, I mean, I think that's a reaction to, you know, some of the political things that were happening at the time.
Yeah,
probably, big time.
Yeah. I think that's usually the case.
Sort of like the apathy towards the system, maybe more than just like actually being anti-happiness or something. But
I think part of the Elephant Six, part of what makes that so good it's equally as much a response, but it's like, we're going to create our own system then that makes us happy.
Yeah. We're still gonna be making this stuff anyway. Might as well make it together and record it and give it to our friends. You know, the most you can do sometimes.
We're making music that probably doesn't have a ton of commercial appeal. Okay, we'll start our own label. Like we'll build our own thing. We'll do it. We'll make our own system. That's one of the things that always grabbed me is the whole DIY ethos and everything like that.
I mean,
it predates like modern times now, where it's a lot easier to maybe make a record in your house and then put it online. With technology that exists now that didn't really exist then. So, it required real energy and effort from these folks to do that.
Yeah, serious dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to define a transparent dream, they say, about things like this. But yeah, this one even gets a little political, not too political, but it says the Always Red Society at one point, and then the next time it says the Always Blue Society, you know, kind of that, you know, two-party, you know, bipolar system we got going on.
That's a moniker that Will Hart records under, the Always Red Society. He's actually released
the Always Red
cassette
Society?
tapes. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so each of them have sort of their own little, you know, like Robert Schneider has solo project, and it's called Marbles. And then Bill Doss has a Sunshine Fix, and Will had Always Red Society. So they had their bands as groups, and then they had their individual recording projects with their own names too. You know, it's a deep rabbit hole, guys. Go down.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I felt when I listened to a little bit of Inspector 34 and found out all the various bands that were connected to his band. I'm going to keep on plugging you throughout this interview.
Wait till the next album's out, then we'll promote it.
Okay. Right. You guys want to get into another track? This is No Growing, and in parentheses, Exegesis. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Here's the next track. Yeah.
One of the last times I listened to this album, I was in the car and I just put it on a long trip with somebody who had never listened to the band before. And it was just, we were just sort of talking and listening to it. And at that moment, he freaked out because he thought a bunch of cars were honking at us.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. They recorded the sound of a car horn honking as a percussive element. Exegesis, by the way, is to lead is a critical explanation or interpretation of a text.
Oh,
okay.
We're all learning. We're all learning on this podcast.
Yeah, but no growing, and then
no growing.
Learning about a text. It's interesting titling.
Yeah, I really love that song. That's a beautiful really song sweet. There. It's a little hard for me to hear, and I don't mean to spoil the film, but in the movie we use it. Bill Doss is explaining that he and Robert Schneider had gone away and spent all day sort of recording this like ooh-ahs that run through the background. He says it's like the Beatles' Michelle.
Okay.
And in the movie, we use that song to lead into the unfortunate fact that Bill Doss passed away in 2012. And so when I hear that song, I have a real sadness associated with it, even though it's actually a very beautiful song.
Well, I mean, I was actually going to say it reminds me every now and again. It hits this album hits the notes of like Elliott Smith. Speaking of another tragedy, it's got that that raw heart to it that just you can feel their emotions coming through and affecting you. I mean, it literally says open up your heart in the lyrics for this one, and they're actually doing that audibly with you. There's a few times they really definitely hit some beautiful emotional notes,
Yeah, I think it's easy to dismiss it maybe sometimes as just being silly or just, cut up random words or that sort of thing. But I think the fact that they leave a lot of things for interpretation is by design. So you can project your own feelings and, ideas onto what it is that they're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was kind of the, thought process between a lot of songwriters back in like the 60s and 70s and stuff. It was like, I mean, that's what, McCartney is all about. It's like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm going to put it in a song, playing around with the expectation that it has to mean something, was always fun for those bands too.
And it speaks to the power of the music that whether or not the lyrics end up meaning anything to you, you still feel the emotion that they're getting across is still conveyed through the music. And I think that almost makes it more powerful, at least for me.
That's a really good point. And it can mean different things to you at different times. You hear it one time and it might invoke a certain feeling, and then you hear it a couple years later and you're like, oh, this hits different right now.
It almost helps make the music be more timeless, because if you were tied down to literal meaning of the lyrics, then you would have a harder time interpreting it.
This you can take out of its context and still get a lot out of it, without connecting things like we do so much in this podcast. It doesn't really need that, but we're doing it anyway.
That's what we do here.
That's what we do here.
What else is the point of a podcast that talks about music, huh?
But the concept is mostly the green typewriter stuff. That's where the concept stuff gets real juicy for you concept heads out there. Let's get on to this next track. Speaking of, so this is actually one, it's almost a peek forward to what you get later. And this is a song, Holiday Surprise 1, 2, 3. And it's almost got three very different sections, 3 songs almost within it. So
it has 3 pretty distinct songs that are mashed together. I tried to capture
parts of 2 of them, because that's all I can do with the way I do this. So here is either 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. I can't remember. That part is really cool, by the way. I definitely recommend people listen to it. I just love the jam after that.
It's a cool sequence. Actually, I was talking to Robert Schneider about putting this record together, and he was saying how there's so much going on that he would mix in sections. And, he didn't have like an automated mixing board where the faders fly up and down on their own. So you would have to do it live, right? And almost like perform a mix. So they would perform, say, the verse and mix that down to a DAT tape. And then they would perform the chorus and mix that separately and differently and have things panning back and forth in different ways and then mix that down. And then he had a friend, this guy named Park Peters in Denver, who was an engineer. And this is the mid-90s, Park had a computer. And this is when nobody was really using computers that much for recording, and they were very rudimentary in what they could do.
Yeah,
but he would take the DAT tapes there, and then Park Peters would piece them together on the computer. And Park mastered the Olivia's records, the Neutral Milk Hotel records, a lot of the Apples and Stereo records. But what's interesting about it is that Park Peters was blind. And so this computer didn't have a monitor. And so Robert was saying, I never actually saw what the software was or what the waveforms looked like. But Park's computer would talk to him, and then he would use keystrokes. And that's how they were assembling this album together.
That's incredible. Shit. That is absolutely incredible.
I don't even know how to process that. That's just amazing.
More organized chaos.
I've thought a lot about the difficulty of piecing together something this elaborate with only the analog equipment. And I was like, oh, okay. So that if they use a computer, that one must have helped a little bit. But it's even, again, still one level removed from how it could be done easily.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's fucking
It's hard
brilliant.
to replicate this album.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't even know much more to say about this track. That just blew my mind.
Yeah, I was surprised by that as well.
Hold on. I have a note here. It says midway through, protagonist literally blasts off into space. Hold on. I'm going to investigate this, guys. Hold on. Let me get
Is that the protagonist of the Unrealized script?
It could be. Yeah.
I always like the lyric, I can't wait for the oxygen to get thin.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I love that lyric.
Imitating you, your image floats 2 feet above the ground. I sit in my seat and wait to take off. I can't wait for the oxygen to get thin. I twist around my seat. I'm flying like a star taker, taking light from the sky, teasing all the people with pictures of you. So yeah, he's blasts off in space, and he's messing with the stars, I guess. This guy, this guy's having an adventure. But
that's almost like a lyrical Rorschach. Yeah, like I don't know. You project your own idea of what that means to you onto that. Yeah.
This whole podcast is kind of a lyrical Rorschach test.
That's true.
In general, yeah. So that was Holiday Surprise 1, 2, 3.
The more we listen to this album, because when I first heard it today was the first time I ever heard it. I thought independently that it sounded very much like the Beatles.
Yeah.
And we keep going down the list like this, and then we get to this, and you're like, both of you guys are saying, oh, this is like a couple of tracks merged together.
Yeah.
Like a couple of songs, and it's just it really just is like a very Beatles-esque.
Yeah, it's
nature.
Got that John Lennon experimentation kind of flair, everything.
And it's just really cool.
Yeah. Because, I mean, John Lennon within the Beatles with Paul McCartney to rein him in was fantastic, I think.
Yeah.
Some of his solo stuff, I don't know, but
it's definitely an apt comparison, I think.
Yeah.
Although I think they both benefited from with Bill Dawson, Will Hart, it seems like they both shared enough experimental sensibilities that they could get a little farther out.
Yeah. Well, I feel like all musicians kind of learned from the Beatles because they were so popular, and the fact that there was their dynamics. And so I feel like a lot of bands after a certain point, just because of all the music docs they've watched, are like, you know what, let's not be dicks to each other all the time. Let's actually I feel like at some point bands made a decision to be nicer to one another, or something. Yeah, this is a great example of them being nice to each other, Elephant Six. And we have Courtyards, the next track here. Here's track 7.
That's a great clip.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it's a jaunty little tune, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
the perfect example of like the harmony and the disharmony. I love in that song just like the piano banging away in the background, seemingly unrelated to the rest of the song, but it just works.
And we talked. It sounded like that one really did sound like that's at a party, like in a dining room. There's a little interlude.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I don't
laughing.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, some solid bass playing on that track too. I think that might be Robert playing bass.
Yeah.
He would record the bass tracks quite a bit for them on the recordings. Yeah. I've started to my ear. I can tell his sort of like melodic style of bass playing now.
Yeah.
You've heard more than anyone maybe, except for the people in the collective at this point.
Yeah. Are you? Would you say that you and Robert Schneider are pals now? Do you guys like text back and forth and hang out now, or
yeah, we do.
Developing a relationship.
We do. Well, that's the thing. We sort of did have a relationship leading into the film, So
cool.
Yeah. My friendship with them was the start of this.
Yeah,
which is probably not like. Well, I never claimed to be like a journalist, So any kind of objectivity that I might have had,
Well, it sounds like he told you to do this, I'm very subjective. So he sounds like he coerced you into doing this whole film about him and his work. So, I mean, I'm sure he's happy.
He presented an idea, and I ran with it. Yeah, that's true. To his credit, honestly, like in the making of the movie, he didn't have a lot of input other than to try to be helpful when I asked questions and that sort of thing. It wasn't like, can you present it like this, or make sure, don't tell that story or this sort of thing. He didn't claim any sort of editorial power over the story
really
that I told with the film. Yeah. It was a lot of trust, and
that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, it would have been weird. It would have been tense if he was trying to tell me how to make the movie, maybe.
Yeah. Because I feel like documentaries are also kind of generally pretty personal medium too. I think that generally it's like when you see a great documentary, it is that person's like experience that they're trying to share through this story that they're telling.
Yeah, and that was really important to me. I didn't want to I think maybe some people, a complaint with the film might be that we don't dive into the personal lives of some of these things more, maybe like Jeff or maybe the breakup of the Olivias or something. Like, what are the details of that? But that wasn't really very important to me. The sort of like almost like facts or something in the telling of the story. I wanted the movie to be representational of more like the feeling of what Elephant Six is,
so
like something birthed from it more than just like a VH1 behind the music look into these bands.
Right.
That was something that I talked about with my partner, who we saw the film together after the screening, was that there was none of that in the film, and it did not suffer from that at all. It sort of would go against the theme and the spirit of the whole thing, to dig into like any nastiness or any like sort of drama or anything like that. It sort of seems against the whole spirit of the thing. It was overwhelmingly like positivity and community, and
it just wasn't. Those weren't the things that were interesting about Elephant Six and this story to me. To me, the fact that these like kids from a small town in Louisiana found each other and were able to bring out the talents of one another in this really symbiotic relationship. And home recording.
If you're talking about like Guns N' Roses, then
there you go.
The conflict is like, it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like that's, you can't avoid that part of the story.
If you're talking about David Lee Roth leaving Van Halen, like, sure, give us the dirt. But in a story like this, I don't know. That wasn't what I.
Well, and from
I don't think that's what anyone comes looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're also inundated with bad news right now too. And
we have plenty of bad
I've been making the movie for a long time, but just to have something generally positive felt like a nice thing to put out into the world.
Just to confirm that you made the right choice. We were saying how nice it was that the film didn't have that spin to it.
Yeah, we all need a little good news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Positivity and optimism.
Certainly.
I was going to say, too, from the way you guys are describing like this whole collective, it doesn't sound like the formation and dissolution of any of these bands was the important thing. It's just somebody had an idea. They kind of like somebody took charge. Everybody kind of said, hey.
Yeah.
And then, they just kept doing projects together. So it's not about the band. It's about
the project.
It's about the project. It's about them. It's about their thoughts, the way they collaborated, how each project is a little bit of a different collaboration.
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, this all sucks, so we're going to break up. And that was never the point.
I'm not getting enough attention.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
And, the creative projects didn't stop just because one band maybe stopped producing records or functioning as a band. Other bands sprouted up in its place that contained many of the same members, And
exactly. Well, that's part of the whole thing. As I got deeper into the mythology or whatever, deeper down the rabbit hole, there's the mystique of Jeff, stopping performing or whatever. But he continued to perform on many albums and make a lot of music.
A very Brian Wilson
people.
of him.
Yeah, he's on,
he's
on Circulatory System records. He's on Apples and Stereo records. Yeah, it's not that he stopped doing things. He just stopped being the face of Neutral Milk.
Yeah. He was like, whoa! I didn't expect this to blow up like this. Guys, calm down. I was just making a record. But we have another track for you guys. Speaking of Neutral Milk, here we have a title that's somewhat reminiscent of Neutral Milk titles. The title is Memories of Jacqueline 1906, kind of reminds me of like Holland 1945 or something. But yeah, here is Memories of Jacqueline 1906. It seems that the sun has finally set.
The sun has finally set over here. Yeah,
we didn't know whether it was going to happen, but it has. But yeah, those Memories of Jacqueline 1906. I think that this one does actually. I mean, titling and feel definitely makes me think Neutral Milk Hotel. I think just a few moments where like it is almost Neutral Milk Hotel. But it's just a few of the elements, as we've been talking about, of the overall, mix. Yeah,
this is a song. I don't have a good story for this one exactly.
That's all right.
But I do know, there's one thing that that I know about just in general about the sort of like the recording of this record is that.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with the Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno?
Yeah.
Peter Schmidt.
Sounds familiar.
It's sort of
they have the cards.
Brian Eno.
Is that with the cards?
Yeah, that's right. It's a series of little statements or suggestions printed out on pieces of paper that Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt conceived that you put in a box and you sort of shake up, and when you need inspiration or some sort of guiding force, you pull out a strip of paper.
Okay.
And they had invented that, I think, in the late 60s, maybe early 70s. And at the time, it was like so hard to find. But Eric Harris, the drummer, found it online. He was internet savvy in the mid 96. I mean, the internet was 2 years old.
Yeah.
And found it, downloaded it as a PDF file or whatever the equivalent was at the time, and then printed it out on a dot matrix printer. And then they cut them up and put them in a decorated shoebox. And whenever they needed, a direction for what they were doing, they would shake it up and pull a little statement out, to guide them.
Just reverse engineering like production techniques. That's very cool.
Yeah,
I'd love to know which of the strategies they ended up employing.
Yeah, I think there are new ones maybe have been added or something. There's a website I found that will like generate them for you.
Yeah.
For example, here's one. Balance the consistency principle with the inconsistency principle.
Oh shit. Okay.
Almost
Damn.
is like for a moment of disharmony for every moment of harmony.
Here's another one. Accept advice.
Sure. That's
okay.
just a good tip in general.
Yeah. That's just a good reminder. Maybe like they're in a situation where like someone isn't accepting the advice, and it's accept
or just
advice.
a good reminder. Yeah, not get too
too wrapped up in yourself. And
I think one was like, get a neck
collective.
massage.
Leave the studio. Stop recording right now.
Yeah, go for a walk around the block, probably. Right there.
Yeah. Those definitely probably needed to be added at some point. They're like, there's not enough breaks in this thing. Like, but so the next couple of tracks, I got a double track here, our first double track, because Tropical Bells is an instrumental, and then it goes into Can You Come Down With Us? So here is that.
That's very Pink Floydian. Right
Yeah. You know who's really eating? I was about to say, you know who really is eating Elephant Six's lunch right now is Tame Impala. I feel like Tame Impala is definitely like, you know, a newer, like, you know, throwback to that psychedelic sound and a real good attention to it, and it's hitting. Everyone's loving it, but that's because, like, you know, psychedelia stuff is a little more, I think, in the ethos than it was.
Yeah, I think he has to be a fan, right? Yeah,
definitely has to.
I really love his records. I think they're
he's great.
Interesting.
He's really good. The second track there, track 10, really I think gets into a little bit of his sound. You know,
I'll just pause to say about the first track, that is one of my favorite songs of all time. I think not just on this album. Tropical Bells is one of those things where it just, there's like certain sounds that when they go into they make my head, the inside of my head feel good and warm. And that is one of them where I just like, oh yeah, this is what I want to be listening to that's a good one for me.
Yeah. So much weird stuff. Blowing bubbles, it sounds like, in water and all these like weird, bizarre things coming at you.
I was thinking maybe it's a reference to Tubular Bells, which is a series of overlay, like a very overlayered song. You know, it's one of the first tape layerings or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a reference to that maybe. But and then the Can You Come Down With Us, just from that to that, back to back.
Great transition.
Yeah. And there's a lot of really good transitions in this album. There's definitely most of them fade into each other in some way. At least the tail end goes into the beginning of the next one.
And Can You Come Down With Us? I mean, that sounds like a real invitation to experiment with something, right?
I was about to say, I mean, we are about to get to the Green Typewriters, so I think that
can't be coming down yet.
Yeah. Maybe Jumping Fences is just when the party began. Yeah. And this whole time we've been in the main party, and we're about to come down with them and experience some Tropical Bells. But before that, we have to get into marking time, and then we're going to take a quick break before we get into Green Typewriters. Here is Marking Time.
Marking my words, as I always do. Still find it hard enough to say. I can't hide, I can't hide.
Man,
that is just.
Yeah.
It's great vocal.
Feels powerful, you know?
Yeah, that's one that really has that obnoxious acoustic guitar sound, right? That really four-tracky, direct, plasticky sound, but it works. And then the piano, there's this like piano line running through it, and the piano sounds like kind of out of tune in this way that just makes the whole song like feel a little maybe off kilter and melancholy, kind of. Yeah,
I feel like that piano gets used periodically. It's always just a little bit out of tune, and like from track to track, you'll notice it, but it always is like somehow right on the money.
Yeah. It just fits everything. Yeah, everything's where it needs to be. You know.
Yeah, they were doing a lot of things too, where they would like, and Will Hart and I have a little conversation in the film about this too, with like broken instruments and things like that, things that are out of tune, where you can maybe like perform a take with it once, but you can't really replicate that later because you'll never be able to make it be out of tune just the same way or broken in just the same way. So I think they really like embraced sort of this temporal quality of these, air quote, junky instruments that they had.
I like that temporal qualities about their songwriting. That's really a cool way to think about that.
Very much of the moment and difficult to, if not impossible, to replicate.
Totally.
Well, that's one of the magics of recording. In
that's
general,
you're trying to capture the little spark.
Live, there's like live music is great, but that is one of the magics of recording stuff. Sometimes you can find that sound that you'll really be able to recreate, but you did it that one time and it sounded wonderful.
Yeah,
and they're always like sticking things in the piano strings and stuff like that. Like they really mess with everything, right? A normal sounding piano would not be a good sounding piano, I think, to those guys, because it's not interesting enough, right? They have to sort of like zhuzh it up in some way.
But I'll say this too, for how much of the temporal quality of the recording songs that they have, I was lucky enough to get to see them live on their last tour. And as a live band, they had an amazing ability to recreate these things that were like products of a specific moment in a really incredible way live, and like not trying to recreate the same thing, but creating something new that was, still true to the spirit of the song and the recording. Yeah. I was blown away by them as a live band as much as I was by them as a recording band, but in a very different way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would relate it to jazz exactly, but I think that they're sort of like creating a framework or like a scaffolding of a song, and then allowing it to populate with whatever happens on stage with all of these different instruments. And
well, I mean, definitely the origins of jazz. That's how it starts. How any great music genre starts is just people just kind of dicking around with their friends. Trying to pass the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but not in any sort of like a technical way, and like a jazz, and the way that like jazz musicians would, but much more into like an intuitive
feeling.
Feel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of absorbing it and then like pushing it out. But yeah, so that's the first little bit of the album, the first 11 tracks. I mean, it is like a full album in itself, the 11 tracks we just listened to. But we have more for you guys. We have to get through the green typewriter adventure we're going to have with the Olivia Tremor control. And so we're going to take our quick break, and we will be right back to talk with the director of the Elephant Six Company documentary. We'll be right back on the Album Concept Hour. Welcome back, everybody, to the Album Concept Hour. We are here for the second half of the Olivia Tremor Control's music from the Unrealized film script, Dusk at Cubist Castle. And we, of course, have our guest, CB Stockfleth, from the current and upcoming Elephant Six Company documentary in theaters now. Especially if you're in Madison, I know that it's somewhere around here.
If you go to elephant6movie.com, there's a list of all the screenings that are scheduled in all the different cities and what theaters there are. And also the socials are all the same too. It's Elephant 6 Movie at.
And links will be in the description as well. So if you just want to head down there, click on it, you will find where it's playing near you. What we have for you now, guys, is the much anticipated.
We've talked about
Green Typewriter. Yeah, I've hyped the hell out of this one. We have 10 tracks that start at track 12. So Green Typewriter number 1 is track 12, and 2 is track 13, and so on, which bothered the OCD in me. But we have a little journey to go on, and we're starting with Green Typewriter 1. Here it is.
So nonsense.
Sets up the premise pretty well, you know.
Yeah.
For Green Typewriters, yeah.
A solid
stage.
Introduction.
Yeah.
That feels of all the songs on this album, that one maybe feels to me like the most like a circulatory system song.
Yeah, that's very Will Hart vibe.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. It's got a nice like laid back, almost I don't know. It's almost got that horse trottiness of like a country western song.
Well, I love that in the clip we didn't get to when the drums fully kick in, but I love that like that 1, 2, 1, just like straight ahead, like slow stomp to that song.
Yeah. It's a slow stomp. Yeah. It's a real like I feel like this live would be a good track. This would be a fun track for the audience. Well, I'm going to give a little bit of the description from that I have for this concept just to set the stage. You're thinking Green Typewriter. What the hell is that? What does that have to do with anything? We have in this 3-year-old Reddit thread, I have PKARRK. I don't know, PK Arc. He says, in my opinion, the entire album Dusk at Cubist Castle is about tripping acid and sightseeing in New York City. So I reckon that they spotted a Hermes 3000 mint green typewriter in the storefront at the Gramercy Typewriter Company storefront in Manhattan and decided to write about it. So, it's a compelling theory. We'll get to it, but he breaks down a couple of the tracks, makes some assumptions about them that we'll get to. But he does, with that in mind, make some assumptions about the story here. And I will say, it definitely does hit some notes of an acid trip, and I'll mention the notes that I recognize as we go.
Reading some of these, and they're very, very funny.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of have the structure of a trip. So, take with that what you will. This is we start though in a fairly grounded place, like we've heard the rest of the record, and then we get into Green Typewriters 2 and 3, which I have coupled up together. Here they are. Oh man, I didn't actually listen to this on headphones when I did my listen through.
Oh, it's great.
There's like when they say the cathedral line, there's like I don't know, is that what am I thinking of? That in the church organ. It's like an organ kind of in the background, just in the left.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun, like little sort of like sonic Easter eggs sprinkled throughout this record, but especially through this Green Typewriters.
Yeah,
maybe we
this
didn't
is a
mention
real
it, but
soundscape.
As we said, this is a double LP, and this Green Typewriter suite plays as one whole side of an LP.
Yeah.
So when you put it on, it's like all side 3 of the record, and they all
it's
play
just
together.
Typewriter.
As we go on this journey, you'll see we sort of like we start off in a little more familiar territory, and then we start to descend into weirder, collagier places, which is something that I think they've been doing for a long time. You know, Jeff and Robert and Bill and Will, they all dabbled in creating sound collages on tape cassettes, and both making field recordings of ambient things, and then also finding tapes in thrift stores and, you know, cutting them up and using little pieces of them and things like that. So
I think Olivia is just such a good gateway drug to more experimental, more sort of avant-garde, less structured music. At least for me, you come to it through like the poppier songs, and then by the end you're like, became like, it was sort of my first introduction to stuff like drone music and experimental noise stuff and all that, and just in a way that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to it otherwise, and a great example that those two types of music don't need to be separate. You can have them both in one album, even in one song, and be just as effective.
Yeah. The guy on Reddit says for Typewriter 3, time slows down and DOS settles into it. So who's DOS again?
Bill DOS.
Bill DOS. Right. We hear some pretty cool, collaboration here, and then we get to Typewriter 4, where we hear a little bit of this. Or wait, no, that's track 4. Hold on. Green Typewriter 4. Here we go.
Wake up, it's what the world should do, and look around, slow down. It's time for everything, just look around. I don't wanna die inside anymore. I don't wanna...
Yeah.
Very happy sounding for the lyrics. I don't want to die inside anymore.
Yeah, that's something we can all relate to.
Tinkering, xylophone and fun sounds.
These guys just like took the spirit of John Lennon and just put it to tape.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's like the most, like, I think the most like well-known example of this type of experimentation. And it kind of got lampooned, I think, by a lot of people, and maybe fell out of style or something. But like, it's a fine way to put together music,
I want to hear what Reddit guy thinks more.
Oh, Reddit guy,
really curious about this
for track 4 now. He says, "Start loving life. It's worth it."
Oh, that's great.
For the fourth one, yeah. And
you're starting to convince me.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I mean, there's like, for a lot of trips, there's like, certain like ego death or what have you that you might
get your
experience.
Ups and your downs for sure.
Yeah. And maybe he's experiencing like that's a possibility that he could have a bad experience or something, but he's like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to hear that song anymore. And he instead is, gonna try to have a good trip. I think
he's discovering a new song in himself.
Yeah. The next track we got for you is continuing right along to Green Typewriters 6 and 7. I have grouped up. Here we go. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry. Green Typewriter 5 is what we're on. It's so hard to keep track of them because they're all the exact same titles. Here's Green Typewriter 5.
That's another one.
Like a bug on a microphone.
Right? Yeah.
That's another one where the sound just goes in my ear, and I'm like, yeah, give me more of that sound in my head. It's very brown, if I can use a Ween term.
Yeah. We're in it now. We've gone somewhere.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
big time.
Yeah. Well, this definitely, like, this is the track where I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a trip, because this is like when blood's pulsating in your ears and you don't know why, you know. It's definitely like can be a disconcerting experience, you know. And they've captured it so well with this little track.
Very out of body experience almost.
Yeah.
You're sweating, but it doesn't matter. And
yeah.
Your eyes are darting
sweat
everywhere, and you're just like,
yeah.
You can like hear your own breathing.
Oh yeah, I know the exact moment of the trip that you were describing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. Yeah.
We're artists around here in our own respect. We've all been there.
Well, yeah.
We're not admitting to anything publicly.
No, of course not. We don't do that on this podcast. We're always
especially not
speaking theoretically.
Angel boys.
Yeah, we're angels here. But
always obey the law. I've never not obeyed the law.
Why wouldn't you obey the law? But yeah, so that's definitely like points to the theory that he's tripping. No notes about this track from the Reddit guy, unfortunately. But we have
self-evident.
6 and what was it? Typewriters 6 and 7 now. Yeah, which is tracks 17 and 18. Here we go.
Gotta be.
Of it, tons and tons of rooms, and lots of them. I'll paint them green and red, and 36 colors to custom mix. A collection of rugs with tons of tiny tassels.
Fuck. That is so
Love
much
those
creepier
voices.
on the headphones. Like, holy shit. Yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah, so that was 6 into 7. You said?
Yeah,
6
yeah,
into
6 into
7.
7.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
6 is like it's kind of abrasive. There's clarinet and all this sort of like it's like hitting you very hard.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
haven't mentioned John Fernandez as a member of the band too. He's the violin and clarinet and bass player in Olivia's, and a big contributor to the sound of their music. Also from Ruston, their childhood home. He's younger than those guys, but he eventually sort of like caught up to them and joined all their bands.
And he's very
brother.
I wonder sometimes because he's gotten much more into like the sort of drone, like his solo stuff is much more like noisy and drony. So I wonder how much of that was his influence on the album.
Yeah, it could have been. I think it's something that they are all partial to.
Yeah.
I've been to, and I had a friend, back in like my 20s that would like made like noise music, which is something I never knew about. And then I actually saw a noise show like somewhere, downtown, and yeah, it was a really just interesting, weird world to dive into. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of it out there. Yeah. One thing I really liked about this track is, where's the line? Oh yeah, the line. Let's see, a place to harmonize away from conventional life, a place to radiate, a place to just be me, to be just me, returning again and again to the giant day inside my head. Tons and tons of ideas that never take off. It causes the untime. It's all on a different level, and there's so many. Their stages are set. Everything's ready. Let the future come. Let the future linger on. And if that isn't a trip, I don't know what is. Like, this is some of the best
like
evidence.
Listening to a recording that you made when you were
yeah. Like literally, what?
This doesn't mean what I thought it meant. Okay.
Well, yeah, and the idea that the Cubist castle is like talking about like skyscrapers, maybe with like the New York thing, because I think part of this is the fact that the last track is NYC 25 or whatever, and he's probably working backwards from that premise, maybe.
It could be. That could be.
but you know, this is because of the untime. You know, he's detached from time right now, and so he can see the end of the album.
Yeah.
You know, in that lyric you quoted, he said the Giant Day, and the Giant Day is their second EP that Olivia Tremor Control put out. They did the California Demise EP, and then they did the Giant Day EP, and
that was before this album.
That was before this, yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll find, you know, they're sort of self-referential at times. They talk about, you know, their other works will sort of like bubble up into their stuff.
I've purely thought of it in the context of the LSD trip thing. I was like, Giant Day inside my head. Yeah,
well, it could be both.
That sounds like something
initially. Maybe that's why it was titled that to begin with.
Yeah, maybe. Exactly. But yeah, what PK Arc says about this one is imagination is a lovely thing. Just don't get stuck in your own head. Good advice. Good advice.
Again,
PK
good
Arc.
advice. Yeah,
appreciate that.
PK
what happens?
Yeah, and then we get on to Green Typewriter number 8. It looked for a second like you two were both reacting to the same sound. I know you're in different places, but sorry. There's not a visual medium.
No, there's a fly buzzing around my head. That's what that is.
Okay. Hold on. We're gonna take a quick pause here while we're waiting for our guest to come back. He's making sure that there's no one outside of the house.
I have a 9-month-old baby asleep in the next room. So
okay, we'll try to be quiet.
Try not to disturb her. Yeah, keep it.
Yeah, I'll keep it down. So this next track is Green Typewriter 8.
This is where I was getting pissed off at work, because I was like listening to it while I was like chopping stuff, doing my prep work in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden I like looked up and I was like, there hasn't been a song or a word in like 5 or 6 minutes. I was like, what is going on right now? I had to like, because I don't have headphones at work, obviously, so I like had to like strain, and I was like, why does it keep dripping?
What's the drip? Why is there a drip back there?
Just
drip,
like
and you're stuck in your own
head.
Yeah.
I love that track. But I'm a sucker for the ambient stuff.
Yeah, I find that an inviting place that's sort of like wah 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 wah.
Yeah,
and there's like natural sound.
Well, this is where it
maybe
gets
in a forest or something. And
this is where it gets real Floydy or dark side. You know, it has a little bit of that because they do that a lot. The or whatever. You know.
Yeah.
Just longer, just a lot longer.
A lot longer.
But this is the one that I actually did throw on my headphones because it was like 8 or 9 minutes, and I was like, okay, they probably want you to hear it on headphones. There's a lot of back and forth, weird, stuff to absorb. I'll probably have to absorb a second or third listen through.
I'll say this too: listening to the album alongside the companion. Album.
Yeah.
Especially, some songs it works better with than others, but for the whole Green Typewriter suite, it works really, really well. It just enhances the whole experience.
Okay. Yeah, I've never attempted any quadraphonic thing like that. I've heard of how to do it. I just haven't attempted. I really want to.
Yeah, this was my first attempt, and obviously I didn't do it right. I just played them both on YouTube through the same pair of headphones. But
yeah, I mean, it's
close enough.
Close enough, yeah. Any thoughts, Chad, on this track before we move on to track 9? I know it's there's not much to say, but besides it's a
point,
soundscape.
You're just floating along with this. I think when I hear that track, what it reminds me of is these guys are from rural Louisiana, and then at this time they're living in Athens, Georgia, which, especially then, is not a big built up city. There's a lot of woods and nature around,
Yeah.
And I don't know, it kind of puts me in that sort of a place, I feel.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In the movie, somebody says, I think it's Dan Donahue, says there's certain records you can't make in New York City, and I think that this puts you there.
Yeah, that's a good line. I'm glad that stayed in the cut.
Yeah.
The guy from Reddit, by the way, I know everyone's wondering what he's thinking about this
we're
track.
all wondering.
Green Typewriters 8 just says you're stuck in your own head, which it's relatable. It's a part of a trip, getting kind of stuck for a second. But fortunately for Green Typewriter 9, he says wake up. So here's Green Typewriters 9. Oh yeah.
How much longer can I wait?
One of the most satisfying
Yeah.
I don't know, moment of catharsis.
Well, yeah, because you're
Yeah, it's a
waiting
real
for like
resolution.
8 minutes or
Yeah.
so of like not conventional music, especially if you're not a someone that is used to noise or those soundscapes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I don't know. Like I love that the vocals come first, and then the rest comes. Because it's so like especially if you're listening on headphones or whatever, it just cuts through. Like you could be like meditating at that point, and then all of a sudden like it just brings you right back into great music that sounds and feels good.
That one specifically too. We've mentioned it sounds like John Lennon, but that moment in particular to me sounds like John Lennon.
Yeah.
The way his voice is EQ'd and that sort of thing. It's like it seems like homage to me.
It's got the little bit of rasp to it.
Yeah. That
What does
one I really
Reddit guy say
enjoyed.
about that one?
Yeah, no, that one's just a really powerful moment in the album.
Reddit guy just says, "Wake up."
He just says, "Wake up."
It's time to wake up out of your stupor.
It feels that way.
Yeah. Especially if you were like, getting really into the
just
last track,
zone
you
out.
actually were zoning out. Like it's probably like a kind of startling if you didn't know it was
I
coming.
like that they got that little airplane noise. Like
Well, that's okay.
overhead.
That's one thing I do want to say about that whole track is that's one of the best parts about the LSD trip approach to the breaking it down, because the first like 6 minutes or so are like wum, 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 like sounds just all over like layered all over top of each other, like very strange, and then like it slowly fades to normal real ambient noises before it gets back to the singing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really like well like structured in that way,
And that's
Back to
realistic to what
reality,
tripping's
yeah.
like, right?
Yeah. You're like
out in this ether, and then you sort of
the-
like the real world comes back and descends
You're
back
like,
upon
oh,
you.
yeah.
And,
Here I am
Yeah.
back in the real world.
yeah.
And then we get to the Green Typewriters 10, which is the end of this saga.
When you're ready to come back down, I'll be waiting here. All your friends will be around. I promise I'll wait forever. Ready to come back.
And, again, going with the LSD thing, when you're ready to come back down, your friends will be there.
Those
So-
lyrics, like the most reassuring thing you could hear in that moment. If you were,
Yeah.
It's really
Definitely.
pleasant, right? It made me smile when I heard that. It almost
Yeah.
feels like,
Yeah.
if you've ever done like a yoga class, and at the end of the class, you're sort of laying there and vinyasa, I believe it's called. And they're
Yeah.
like, okay, just lay here and relax until you're ready to get up and then come back into your body and then stand up and leave on your own time. And that's what that feels like.
Yeah.
When you're ready to come back down, we'll be here. All your friends
Yeah.
are here. We'll wait
Yeah.
forever.
Man, I need to meditate more, man. This is making me wanna just sit in a room and hear some awesome music and zone out. This track, Green Typewriters 10, our good friend PK Arc says, it's just about coming down from the trip and making sure your friends have a soft landing too.
Yeah,
And that's
that
all he's got
tracks.
to say about the Green Typewriters. So thank you, PK Arc. We
Thanks,
appreciate
PK
your
Arc.
contribution 3 years ago on a random Reddit post. Because I'm gonna be honest, I definitely needed context, and that helped.
He was our guide through.
He was our
He was
guide.
our
Exactly.
guide,
He was
yeah.
our guide through the trip.
Wonderful
Yeah,
guide.
You need that sometimes. But yeah, this next couple of tracks I got for you, we're getting back into. They ended.
Now we're on to
with,
side 4.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
We
The
flipped the
final
record.
act of this record, and I've doubled up 22 and 23. Here is "Spring Succeeds" into "Theme for a Very Delicious Grand Piano." By the way, I do recommend people listen to the rest of the theme for a very delicious grand piano because it's excellent. I really enjoy that.
Haunting piano.
Yeah, yeah, very eerie piano. It just hits all the right notes.
Yeah, that seems like an example to me of where they've stuck, random pieces and bits of metal or things in the strings of a piano and
Yeah.
really like wrangled some bizarre sounds out of it.
It just
Yeah.
resonates. Yeah, it's easy to forget that so many of these sounds are all produced by like analog and not just run through a bunch of.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it would be so
Yeah.
easy to like, oh, I get a piano and I'll run it through 6 effects and make it sound weird. It's just
Yeah.
like had to actually manipulate the
Yeah.
physical thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we've found, I mean, for people that pay attention to music production, I guess, is that like you can tell when the shortcuts are made. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
Like the journey to make music and make that journey. I was just watching a interview with Jack White and Conan O'Brien where he's talking about this, how like he uses like the shittiest instruments he can find so that it's like the hardest to play so that he's challenging himself in a very Catholic way, as Conan O'Brien was saying it. Yeah, there's definitely something to that when it comes to songwriting and creating stuff that like really resonates with people. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that Spring Succeeds song kind of reminded me a little bit of like the Turtles or like maybe not the Beatles, but the Monkees a little bit.
Hmm.
You
I
know,
can see that.
It's a good
Yeah.
poppy Bill Doss song.
yeah. He's got those hooks. You know,
He's got the hooks.
yeah.
And
Someone's
as we talked
gotta
about earlier, I
have
mean,
the
when
hooks.
you survive this sort of like green typewriter side of the LP, and then you flip it over, you need a little like
Little pick me
a little relief
Yeah.
or something, It's like,
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
something with like a familiar harmony, something melodic
Mhm.
that I can, like ground
Yeah.
myself again. And
Yeah,
that's the thing I
yeah.
love about them is they're really considerate of their albums as albums, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
As a physical media that you're gonna like flip over and then drop the needle on or things like that. Even going back
Yeah.
to their early 7-inches,
Yeah.
like I think the very first Elephant 6 release, which is the Apples in Stereo 7-inch, has like a lock track at the end. So when it reaches the
Oh,
end
cool.
of the side
I
of the
love that.
record,
I
it
love
just
those.
loops a sound over and over and
that's
over and
right.
over until you go up and like lift the needle off the record, right? So
Yeah.
they're always considerate of the media itself, which I think is cool.
Yeah. I love that. We have another track for you. I'm not sure if he's still tripping, but he's saying here at this point, I can smell the leaves. So, I mean, he could just smell the leaves. You don't have to be tripping to smell the leaves. But here's I can smell the leaves.
Here I can smell the leaves. Little by little it gets colder. Take the bus downtown, right to the bars with your
Oh, there's some good like flute in the background there. I didn't notice before.
This is a record that I've listened to a lot, And every time I
Yeah.
listen to it, I hear something new,
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
like all these layers of things happening, and instruments combined with each other and that sort of thing that you don't
Yeah.
you hear as one sound, and then later you're like, oh, that's a clarinet mixed with the fuzz guitar, or that's something
Yeah.
completely different and weird. It's like you can discover so many things each time you go through it.
Well, yeah,
To
'cause
me,
the
that makes
way
it a really
they're-
really interesting record.
Yeah, because the way the recording is, I'm assuming, sometimes a lot of people or a lot of instruments on the same sound file, the way that they're recording these things. So you can kind of hear them, kind of the sound waves interacting, I suppose,
Yeah.
if that's a thing. Because that's, it's different when you're playing at the same time than when you, just do it track by track by track by track by track,
Absolutely.
different feeling. But yeah, really, really great. This one like reminds me of like kind of the perfect New York day, I guess, going with that earlier idea of like traveling through New York. Like
This is
it's just
upstate,
kind of-
though. If you're smelling the leaves, got to be upstate.
Well, I was thinking
Central
either that or
Park,
Central
maybe?
Park. Yeah, I was
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I was
Central Park.
specifically thinking like, well, the only places this would be possible is Central Park. So yeah, they finally hit Central Park after their whole day of traveling. But it just it gives that just evokes that feeling of just I think there's a Frank Sinatra song we covered that's about like spring in New York or something. Whereas this is maybe fall in New York.
I was gonna,
But-
that really like it really feels like a fall song.
Yeah.
And as
yeah.
we were listening to it, my almost brain capture really just sees like old fuzzy films, someone carrying a guitar, just walking through New York when it's like autumn or something like that,
playing at the
like,
corner or
just
something.
like in your own head, that's the kind of footage I'm seeing while I'm listening to this,
Yeah. It definitely evokes.
You're listening
evokes
to
something.
watching like an old film or
Grainy
or
footage,
Time Life, commercial, and
I like it. This one it's just a good. It got a good vibe to it and everything. Just
Also
nice
be
track.
that fresh perspective you feel, maybe after you've had a
Yeah.
psychedelic experience where
Yeah.
you're looking at things anew and you're smelling things,
Yeah.
that you smelled, but you're smelling them for
you're
the
really
first time
hearing the
again.
colors.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're really hearing
yeah.
the colors, exactly.
Yeah. And then I guess then if we're following this concept, the next one is Dusk at Cubist Castle, which if you go with the idea that the Cubist castles are skyscrapers, which someone pointed out, which I think works pretty well. I think it fits. So here's Dusk at Cubist Castle.
Dusk at Cubist Castle. Dreams of the
Oh yeah, I want to emphasize like how varied that song was. That track.
Yeah. That's a
There's
very
lot going
long
on in
one,
that
right?
Yeah. It's got a real long atmospheric intro, then a song, then a moody, trippy bit, and then there's a little ditty at the end.
That's one where
Yeah.
Robert Schneider had mentioned to me that he had found a Tibetan Buddhist shop in Boulder, Colorado, and they had all
Okay.
these prayer bowls. And so he'd gotten several of them, and you kind of play that. That's like a metal bowl. You might have this wand. You kind of rub it around the edge of it,
Yeah.
and it starts to vibrate and create this bell-like ringing, droning sound.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you can hear them playing that. And then the Olivias ended up incorporating that into their live show among many other esoteric instruments.
Wow, that's very cool. That must have been
Yeah.
really fun shows to. Those must have all been really amazing shows to witness. Just from what I've seen from the footage that you guys have put together. Yeah, that's so cool. There's one genius note on this, and that's the person that was basically saying that based on the lyrics, the lines are likely designs to suggest, walking through, New York or something, sharp lines like skyscrapers. And we have another track that my only note here is Inspector 34 should cover this. So here is the Gravity Car. Yeah. Seriously, I think you guys could do a good cover of that, Jim.
Well, I'll run it by the gang.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I love that this is like the second to last track, though. It's like such a strange.
It's a complete left turn from how any of the rest of the album has sounded.
Yeah, like any of the album.
Still,
yeah. I took a ride in a Gravity Car. Oh, okay.
I think something that I really enjoy about Olivia's is they have a real sense of humor too.
Yeah,
like there's a playfulness to these songs. It's not all just the self-serious, introspective music. It's
I think that's
just silly for silliness' sake.
That's I think part of why like sort of this type of music ended up becoming fodder for jokes and satire, because it can take itself too seriously. And one of the great things about, I think, Elephant Six in general, but the Olivia's in particular, is they don't do that, and it makes it a lot more fun to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the fans of this music take it a lot more seriously than the artists in the in the space. You know what I mean?
I think that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean that's probably why Jeff Mangum got sick of it and just was like, I'm gonna be more of a recluse. Actually, I'm gonna. Your guys is I'm sick of hearing the 12th breakdown of In an Airplane Over the Sea that you've conspired.
Yeah.
But they just want to make music and have fun. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It's nice, whimsical, and a fun way to get to the last track. And then we have NYC 25, which, again, just a great way to close things off.
Don't forget, you're the only one. Hold your kite on a string. Don't sleep too long.
I love that line.
Yeah.
You're the only one holding your own kite on a string.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
You can have support and you can have your friends and you can even live in your own world, but you're the only person that's really holding your brain, that's really keeping yourself on track.
Yeah. Definitely.
And don't sleepwalk through your life, everything you need to make it happen, you've already got right there.
You got to be aware.
Yeah.
Got to be aware of all your bumbling.
It's such a powerful way to end it. It's such a positive message. It's I don't know. I like albums that end this way.
I think I really love about the actual ending of that song too is it's like, it sounds like Bill is playing guitar and kind of flubs the last chord a little bit or something. And kind of goes okay. And then somebody says, well, that's a take. And then this ethereal singing saw part comes in, and it sounds like they've run that through maybe a space echo or something, giving it this extraterrestrial ambience or something. But I don't know. It makes me laugh that they keep in the little flub and the line and all that sort of stuff. It's those little mistakes and imperfections are what give it so much charm and humanity to me.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy on Genius, actually, he had a comment. He's like, it's good, but I don't really like the ghostly sound at the end of it. Kind of kills the moment for me. It's like this music dude guy, by the way, 3 years ago.
Music dude guy. All right.
Yeah. 3 years ago. Oh no, is he this maybe a PK Arc and a different username? I don't know.
He gets around.
I love the way that comes in. because for me, it immediately evoked the Neutral Milk Hotel and the Airplane Over the Sea. A lot of that is used in that album, and I went and listened to that album right quick again. Yeah. Anyway,
a great ending to a great album.
Yeah, it's such
and
we made it through the 27 tracks, guys. Yeah. A little pat on the back for everyone that got through the 27 tracks.
Yeah.
Good job, us. Yeah. The crowd's going wild. And it feels like 3 albums this album. You know what I mean? It feels like, because it's that green typewriter things in the middle, it feels like 3 separate albums almost.
Mm-hmm. It really does, yeah.
But I mean, I definitely recommend listening to it start to finish, even if there is a 8-minute drony bit.
Especially because it
is. Right. Yes, right. We'll go around the horn. We got one more thing to do where we go around and find out what everyone's been listening to lately and what they have to plug before we get out of here. What I'll do is we'll start with John, then we'll go to me, and then we'll go to Jim and end with our guest Chad. So, John, what have you been listening to anything recently at all?
Oh, not too much. Yeah. Not too much. I just went on vacation, so we were listening to some podcasts with Steph.
Okay, nice.
The guys we fucked. I think that's that's her favorite one, and we listened to a lot of that on the trip. So I'm gonna throw that out from a lady friend.
I think that's they're
pretty great. They cover a lot of
Earwolf podcast. I think.
They cover a lot of good stuff. They really just have a lot of great guests on too. It's all over the board.
Okay.
Listening to one with the. She had a friend on who does like webcam stuff, but it all came from a very positive perspective, and she talked about all the angles of it. It's good stuff, So,
yeah. Interesting. Okay. I always remember seeing them like in my like podcast feeds, like being suggested. They had really salacious logo, of course.
And otherwise, as far as what I have to plug, I guess watch Reservation Dogs. That show needs as much attention as possible.
Well, yeah, that's true.
The show's great. It shows great
and
representation on Native Americans. It's a wholly Native cast done by Taika Waititi. Of all people, and I just find that great. And the show's great, and it's funny, but it's also serious, and it covers a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, and it deserves to keep going.
Yes. Well, I think it's on its final season.
I know it's on its final season.
And it's sad, but it does deserve.
It
does deserve to keep going because it is really good content.
Yeah. Well, as for me, I've been listening to the Elephant 6 playlist. Their AV Club had a playlist that they put together for some of the the main songs that you need to listen to. Thumbs up a few of those so that they're in my Spotify or whatever. And as far as what I got to plug, I'm just gonna plug the YouTube youtube.com/Flyover State Park. We're trying to put out more videos. I got a few on the back burner right now. I'm working on it, guys. And I'll also plug the Elephant 6 company documentary. If it is something at somewhere locally, go check it out. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited to finally see it. Future Brad has probably seen it by now, and he loved it. Then what about you, Jim? What have you been listening to lately, and what do you have to plug?
So I've been trying to force myself to listen to something other than the Beach Boys, and it's been working for a change. I'm still listening to a lot of Beach Boys.
You're wearing a Beach Boys shirt, which leads
I
you
saw
to believe...
this. I bought this at the Hollywood Bowl where I saw them live on the 4th of July.
Very American of you.
I've been, aside from the Beach Boys, which I've been listening to all the unreleased Beach Boys songs because they have about 200.
Yeah.
I've been listening to, I've been remembering bands that I used to listen to that I stopped listening to because I only listened to Beach Boys for like 2 years. And I forgot that how much I like Animal Collective, and they put out a new song like a couple of weeks ago, and it's great. It's 20 minutes long, and it's really good. And they have a new album coming out soon, I guess. So I'm excited about that.
I may or may not have seen them while on one of the substances we talked about today.
Hey,
yeah,
it's a good way to do it.
Really curtail it to you if you're going that way. But yeah, hell yeah, dude, Animal Collective
and
rocks.
Yeah, that's what I've been listening to. And what I have to plug is my band, Inspector 34, although Brad has been tirelessly plugging us.
Shamelessly.
Our new album is still being mixed. It'll come out probably early next year, but we put out a live album in
That's right.
May, I think. So listen to that if you haven't. If you like Olivia Tremor Control, if you like Elephant Six, you probably will like us because that's one of the big ones.
It's true. It's true, guys.
I learned a lot about how to put an album together from Olivia Tremor Control. Speaking of how amazing this album is, and the way they do their transitions and consider the album as a whole is very important to us and the way we put our albums together. So if you like this album, you'll probably like our albums too. Also our label, our pale imitation of a Elephant Six style collective label, Sad Milk Collective. You can check us out on Patreon, where we have a bunch of songs that you can't hear anywhere else but on the Patreon, patreon.com/Sad Milk Collective. And also check out my Channel 101 show, Cartoon Show, which as of this month has not been canceled yet. Episode 6 will be coming out next month. This past episode, I had the amazing and very funny Ron Lynch and Eli Leonard on the show. That was very cool.
Yeah.
So check it out and watch it and vote for us so I don't get canceled.
Watch it as it comes out and vote for it. Yeah, because that is important, guys.
It's the most important thing.
Apparently, you need people watching it. Yeah, that's a key to things.
Turns out. And also, I'll plug the Elephant Six documentary.
Yeah.
Watching it in the theater, having seen it in the theater, it's the best. It was so great. It's just great. Yeah. Can't recommend it enough.
That's a testimonial right there, folks. We did not pay him for that.
Well, what about you then, Chad? What have you been listening to lately? And what do you have to plug? I mean, obviously documentary and stuff. But yeah, what have you been listening to?
Yeah, I don't want her to overhear, but I was traveling recently, and my wife, Steph Chura, I was listening to her records on the plane ride because sometimes it comforts me to hear her voice. And I hadn't heard her records in a while, and they're really great. And I love that. And she will have a third one coming out relatively soon. But in addition to that, I've also been listening to...
And they're good even if you're not married to her, right?
That's right. I think so. But besides Steph Chura, I've been listening to a lot of Caetano Veloso, Brazilian Tropicalia, 1960s, 70s songwriter. Love his music, and revisit a lot of that time period of Brazilian music. Often. It's nice. It delights me. And as far as things to plug, obviously the documentary film, The Elephant Six Recording Company, which will be premiering in New York and many other cities on August 25th at the IFC Center, and in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Theaters, in Toronto at the Ted Rogers Hot Docs Theater, and a number of other cities. And then it will also be available for rent and for sale on Apple TV and Prime on September 1st.
Oh, man. Well, congratulations on getting this all done and getting it out to the world. We really appreciate you doing that. We appreciate you being on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun talking to you about all of the ins and outs of the Elephant Six company and your connection, being so close to Robert Schneider and everything. This has just been a really, really great time. I appreciate you so much coming on the podcast. Thanks, Jim, for being on the podcast as well. I know I don't have as big of an outro thing for you for this episode in particular, but
no, thanks for asking me to do this. This was a treat.
Yeah. And
guys are great, by the way.
Yeah. John's back to say we're all great, and you
Thanks,
guys are all
John.
great. You
Jim,
listeners.
you're becoming quite the VIP on our.
That's
on
true.
Our
Yeah,
guest list.
you've at least been on maybe 5 or 6 times now. So
This
you
might be my
he's like
fifth
right under
appearance,
Trevor.
yeah. You
We're-
should
we're-
be getting a lapel in the mail or something. I don't know.
That's good.
We're
I need some
amassing our
swag.
own like 5-timers club, like SNL.
That's right. That's true. Well, we'll have to get all the 5-timers on together, and then we'll leave the room, and then they can just do the podcast.
Yeah.
That'll be good for you.
yeah. It'd be great. It would take
We
week
get
off.
the night off.
But this can't blow up in our faces at all. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you guys next time for another episode of the Album Concept Hour.
Thanks, bye.
The Album Concept Hour is Brad LeBaron, Dave Gallagher, and John Aker. Special thanks to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard for the theme music. Join the discussion on our Discord, tweet to us at Album Concept Pod, or for everything else, go to Linktree/Flyover State Park. See you on Side B. This is Flyover State Park. You are clear to land.